Come with me as we watch another Tubi movie called The Ass's Taint, The Assistant. A woman named Donna, who is carrying twins, goes into labor. Unfortunately, her OB-GYN, aka her physician, has car trouble, so Nurse Ravenfield steps in and delivers her baby. After getting one of the babies out, Donna goes into shock, forcing Raven to choose between Donna and the twin. Since Raven wants to save them both, she revives Donna, resulting in one of the twins' death. 20 years later, Raven has become a successful doctor who has built an OB-GYN empire and has become the first woman to own and run a Fortune 500 company. She founded the American Baby Center for Women, where she educates women on the importance of prioritizing their health to lessen the chance of stillbirth. After one of her procedures, her zesty gay coworker hypes our girl up saying, "It's giving superwoman sis." Getting increasingly overwhelmed with her workload, resulting in scheduling conflicts, she decides to hire an assistant. One day, as Raven is doing an interview in her clinic, she notices Annie Dotson, the clinic's cheery new intern, watching her. Raven comes home to a bouquet, a surprise arranged by her architect boyfriend, Sean Houston. Hey, that's our boy Flex from that show One-on-One. As they're about to go upstairs, Sean says he sees her poking out that coat. That made me look for an eggplant. The two get freaky. Then, he asks her if she has decided to marry him. She tells him he has an established career and she still is in the building process. Girl, you literally have a Fortune 500 company. You a girl boss. Later, her best friend Tiana, who is living next door, talks to her about marrying Sean. Can we first adore Raven's amazing body? Adi Adi. Raven interviews numerous applicants for the assistant position, but finds everyone unfit for the job. One day, Annie takes the initiative to make coffee for the stressed Raven. When Raven asks her how she knows about how she likes her coffee, Annie says she's an intern who's been working there for a few weeks already. Aside from being attentive, she also learned a lot from Nurse Randy, who just resigned but had worked closely with Raven. Before she leaves, Annie tells Raven that she doesn't mind helping her when her shift is done. Because of this, Raven asks her to come early the next day to help with answering the phone. This girl really perky, but not as perky as Raven's twins. Soon, Annie creates a patient list calendar for Raven to remind her of her schedule. Impressed by her initiative and performance, Raven hires her to be her full-time personal assistant. Annie continues to be so efficient that she even finds 3 companies that give out loans to independent businesses, all female investors, and sets Raven an appointment with them. Extremely satisfied with Annie's performance as her assistant, Raven approves Annie's request to be permitted to assist during a delivery, as she has never witnessed one before. At a restaurant, Annie meets with her sister Heather, and the other customers give her weird looks. They catch up and Annie tells her about Raven. "I'm about to slap that random customer looking annoyed AF." Raven invites Annie to go with her to the investor party and brings her to her house so she can wear one of her dresses. Raven removes her glasses, saying she looks better without it. Girl, what if she's blind? The two party, but why is it giving let's be honest vibes? The next morning, Annie shares with Raven that she's from Oregon, and after her parents died a couple of years ago, she moved in with her sister and her sister's husband in Palmdale. When that didn't work out, she moved to the city with a friend to find work, which she struggled to find until she found Raven's ad on Craigslist. Wait, people still use Craigslist? Annie then grabs Raven's hand and tells her, "I won't let you down," which Raven finds a bit weird. Raven asks Annie to run an errand for her and gives her her house keys. When she gets home, she finds a bouquet with a card that says "For you," which she assumes is from Sean. Annie, who's still in her house, tells her that she bought them for her as a thank you gift for everything that she has done for her. Before Annie leaves, Sean arrives and finally meets Annie, whom Raven has been telling him about. They try to rush her out as Sean says, "Daddy has a little surprise for you. Mr. Flex Washington, I hope it's a big surprise." The next day, as Sean is leaving Raven's house, Annie is across the street, eerily watching him. Oh, so maybe she is Lebanese. One night, the talk in her office. Annie thanks Raven and says she's happy Raven doesn't think she's a weirdo. Girl, she does though. Raven offers to drive Annie home and discovers that Annie spends the night in a homeless shelter. When the guard turns Annie away because there's no more available bed for the night, leaving her nowhere to sleep, Raven brings her home. When Annie says that her sister doesn't know about her situation and that she doesn't want to be a burden to her since she has a family of her own, Raven advises her that it's okay to ask for help sometimes, and being independent doesn't mean she should be stupid. And to help Annie, Raven offers that she temporarily stay with her and gives her a raise so she can afford her own place. Later, Annie hears a concerned Tiana protesting Raven's decision to let her stay because she's only known her for a short time. Raven, however, trusts Annie and likes having her around since Sean goes out of town a lot for work. The next morning, while Raven is taking a shower, Annie goes through Raven's phone and blocks Sean. That night, Annie enters Raven's room and watches her sleep. In the comments below, put down your theories on who Annie is. I already had my suspicions from the jump. Raven is frustrated that Sean doesn't answer her texts and calls. Meanwhile, Annie is talking to Heather on the phone and tells her that she'll send her her new address. Annie says Heather is dying to meet Raven. While out for dinner, Raven tells Annie about Donna. She says that she was more than capable of delivering her first real delivery in a hospital, but Donna was unaware of all the risks that came with her pregnancy, so it resulted in complications. Because this is a Tubi movie, they don't really explain beyond simple medical terms. The incident made Raven incredibly passionate about educating women about taking care of their health during pregnancy to prevent the incident from happening again. Thankfully, she hasn't lost a baby since. The next day, Raven is about to leave for a doctor's appointment when Annie goes off at her for not informing her, saying she needs to know everything because she's the one who handles her schedule. Bitch, you better know your place. She quickly apologizes, saying she just wants to be efficient, and Raven clarifies that she doesn't like being questioned, especially with her personal dealings. Raven then explains that she's not used to having help with her schedule. After Raven leaves, Heather appears in the kitchen, saying she let herself in because the back door was open and Annie didn't answer her phone, but quickly leaves. Sean calls Raven's clinic, and when Raven gets mad at him for not answering his texts and calls, he tells her that she's the one not returning his. Raven, thinking that he is messing with her, accuses him of cheating on her again. Before he hangs up, he tells her to check her phone before she accuses him. Annie immediately appears and adds fuel to the fire, saying maybe she really can't trust him, and long-distance relationships never work. Because of this, Raven decides that maybe she and Sean should spend some time away from each other. Tiana brings up her dislike against Annie again, but Raven says Annie is just socially awkward. Not convinced, Tiana thinks that Annie giving her flowers is mad weird. Tiana, like what Drake said, no new friends. Raven invites Annie to go with her to the annual Medical Cares event. While at the event, Annie retreats to a corner and cries to Heather, who also shows up at the event, saying that she feels out of place with all the doctors and medical people present. Heather comforts her, saying she doesn't need their approval, but Annie tells her that she wants to fit in and be like Raven, who she thinks is perfect. When Heather tells her that she's going to not like Raven if she makes her feel bad about herself, Annie composes herself and defends Raven, saying she's a good person. After Heather leaves, Raven finds Annie, who shares about feeling out of place. She comforts her, saying she hired her because she's good at what she does and not because she wants a clone of her. To help her with her insecurity, Raven gives Annie a makeover, which makes Annie very happy. Sean visits Raven at her house to settle their issue, and Annie listens as the couple argues. They discover that Sean was blocked in her phone and they reconcile, which makes Annie angry. I just know Annie's va JJ hangry right now. After Raven spends the night at Sean's, she returns home in the morning with a huge smile on her face and a ring on her finger. Annie goes off on her again for not informing her about her whereabouts, which sparks an argument between the two. Annie switches from being mean to being apologetic, which Raven finds concerning. This hoe got a split personality. Seeing Raven's ring, Annie acts excited that she's engaged, then mocks her for saying yes to a man she said she didn't want to speak to again when she was angry. Unhappy with Annie's behavior, Raven frankly tells her to stop, but she says Annie can stay in her house as long as she wants. Girl, Raven is fucking stupid. Raven later tells Tiana about Annie's behavior, to which Tiana strongly advises her to get rid of her immediately. Raven finally seals the deal with an investor, and when she announces it to her staff, Annie interrupts to suggest a marketing strategy. Raven later reprimands her for disrespecting her, especially in front of her staff. But Annie refuses to follow protocol as she considers herself more of a family to Raven and threatens to quit if she reprimands her again. When Raven gets home, she finds Annie winning Sean over with her cooking. Annie shares a story about her childhood, which indirectly reveals that she's jealous of how Heather is everyone's favorite because she's better than her in everything, and adds shady praises towards Raven. While Sean is not suspicious, Raven starts feeling that there's something shady about Annie. Your girl been warning your ass. Little does Raven know, Annie has secretly allowed Heather to live with her. When Raven checks on Annie, Heather quickly hides to not get caught. Heather then suggests a way to get rid of Sean. One morning, Tiana stops by Raven's house while Raven is at Sean's. When she can't find Annie anywhere, she goes through her suitcase and discovers magazine clippings of Raven and a selfie Annie took with a sleeping Raven in the background. Alarmed, Tiana shows Raven what she has found, but because the writer wants to create more suspense, Raven thinks that Annie might just idolize her. Raven a doctor, but she dumb. Raven then finds a photo of Annie and her dad and an envelope containing his address. Annie arrives, confronts Raven about going through her stuff, and starts an argument about Raven choosing Sean over her. Raven visits Mr. Dotson, who shares that he hasn't spoken to Annie since after her mother passed. When Raven asks why Annie told her he died, he says Annie often says things that aren't true. When she asks about Heather, Mr. Dotson makes her leave. Raven gets home and finds Annie wearing her dress. Annie then calls her mom before leaving to meet with Heather. When she returns, she hears Tiana advising Raven to get rid of her and calling her a psycho. Later that night, Annie attacks Tiana in her house. Mr. Dotson calls Raven to inform her that Annie is an only child. As it turns out, Donna is Annie's mother. At 4 years old, Annie started imagining she had a sister, whom she plays with and talks to. Oh, that's why the Asian chick mean mugged her ass. He advises her to call the police, warning her that she's in danger if Annie is saying that Heather is around. Who predicted that plot twist? I think most of us saw that from a mile away. Annie confronts Raven for saving her abusive crackhead mother instead of Heather, blaming her for her painful, lonely childhood, where she was blamed for Heather's death. I blame the crack for Annie's crack-headed psycho ass. Raven offers to get her professional help and acknowledges her as her daughter to calm her down, resulting in Annie fighting with Heather in her head. Annie, are you okay? Are you okay, Annie? Annie reveals that she killed her own mother. Then, Annie threatens Raven with a gun for killing her baby twin sister Heather. Eventually, Annie loses it and shoots fake Heather for talking too damn much. Sean arrives, and after Annie shoots and stabs him, Annie engages in a struggle with Raven. Fortunately, before Annie can stab Raven, Tiana arrives and shoots her psycho ass. 6 months later, Raven, now Mrs. Houston, gets a new intern. What did you guys think of this? Why characters always so stupid and naive? At least Sean survived. There's a sequel. Should we cover it?
Subscribe to watch more videos like this. Turn on notifications. And leave a like, it really helps the channel out. Thank you for watching.